So,
Yeah. I I would like to take this transition point to go to the Super Bowl. About a hard switch, but I think it's well worth our time, I think. Super Bowl 58 was on Sunday. My heart was broken as I watched Pat Mahomes hoist the Lombardi trophy and suffered through Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey's triumph. It was the most watched event in America since the moon landing.
mm,
It averaged 123 million viewers, the most watched telecast for one single network ever. And at one point in the game, 202 million on people watched some of the game. What the hell's happening here, Saby?
I don't know. I mean, can you compare to the most? Do you have the analytics on what the next highest Super Bowl rankings were? Because I just assumed it grows every year. So
It
I didn't
doesn't.
real.
No, it doesn't
Okay,
work.
okay. So I wasn't aware of this. It has to have something to do with Taylor Swift, of course. I mean, you would think like that's a good place to start, no?
I'm sure she played a role. Look, I don't want to give her all the credit. I mean, I think, man, I think that I think that she has been a magnet for more women, and we can see that in the data, for more women coming to the NFL this year. And I can't deny that. Um, but I wouldn't give her all the credit. I think the fact that it went to overtime probably did it. I think we saw the peak as it is typically in the halftime show. That was a pretty high peak. It was nearly 130 million viewers who wanted to watch Usher for some reason. And I don't hate Usher. I really don't. But I think he was just. It's not something that truly enthralls me. You
Well,
know,
and
the idea of Usher.
also they seem to pick like legacy people that are at least 10 years removed from their peak relevance. At
Yes,
least, right? Sometimes
perfectly.
decades. Um, I had no issue with the halftime show. I thought it was really entertaining. I mean, as you know, if you're going to serve me a Twinkie or a McDonald's cheeseburger, I'll take it. And that's not a knock on him, but it was as entertaining as I could hope. It wasn't like Prince, right? But um, I was cool with it. I'm just wonder why Usher would draw. I mean, do young people watch the Super Bowl, or do they just like tune into meme clips afterwards?
Yeah, the NFL is the only sport in America that's strong across just about every group.
Okay.
And their weak spot was women, and that's the Taylor Swift factor.
Hmm.
So that's where I can't not give her any credit.
I mean, could it be that it was the top two expected teams to make it before the season? I mean,
I
some of this has to do with some of this has to have to do with football, doesn't it?
I think it's more. I think Pat Mahomes has a very big part of this equation.
As being the
Um,
new Jordan kind of figure.
Not so much that being the Jordan type of figure. I think that's kind of overblown, but I think he is a national figure in a way that a lot of artists are not.
Mm.
So this is I just pulled up the Super Bowl, the top numbers of all the.
Okay, well, last year's was the third. It's the next on the list, but yeah, you go all the way back to 2015. But then the year before that was the fifth on the list. So I mean,
Yeah, but you
Richard
go
Nixon's
back into.
resignation speech. That's
Well,
great.
it was a giant deal.
Mass
Yeah, but
Year's
if you go
finale, I remember that. But I mean,
but
all the rest of those are Super Bowls, and a lot of them are fairly recent. So,
fairly recent, but you also get into 2018 is 103. That's a
mm,
significant drop. And if you go back into, I've seen lists that go back into the 2000s, we got under 100 for a
mm,
while.
mm,
And in the 90s, we were under 100. So we have seen this ascendancy of football. So as truly one of the few things in the world that is a universal or near universal thing, we had nearly 2/3 of the population watch some of this. So it is one of the few things that brings us all together, strangely enough.
sure.
And I struggle with it, honestly, not because I don't love football. I love football. I just, it surprises me that I know and we've talked a bit about this before about the lack of monoculture and everything else sort of falling off.
Hmm.
But man, it, as you noticed in these numbers, you know,
I
it,
mean,
it
Super Bowl,
it's
Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super
it's
Bowl,
ascending.
Nixon, moon
These
landing,
these numbers are ascending
more or
for the most,
less. Yeah, yeah,
more or
yeah.
less.
On a trend
The,
up for sure. Yeah, yeah.
the trend is upward in an era where the trend is downward everywhere else. The only real comparison, and I do have that as well, is the World Cup final in 2018. Around the world, it attracted 1 billion people.
Wow.
Um, and those two seem to be the only two events that are on par or somewhat on par.
I mean, I don't think this is a mystery. These are the last vestiges of shared moments, as you were just hinting at, right? I mean, and those are the two sports that have like an iron grip on their respective audiences. The World Cup, the soccer is more global of that status, right? It's like all over except here. But you know, football is number one with a bullet, so it doesn't surprise me.
There it was an interesting tweet that that left something out that all this, this us media geeks sort of like crowing about this, that we left out, because there is has been one change. Yes, Sunday Super Bowl was the most watched American broadcast since the Apollo 11 moon landing. But first moon landing was watched by 64% of America. Super Bowl 58 was watched by 37% of America.
Right, and you're saying that at some point it tipped higher to like close to 2/3 of the population, but
Well, watch some of it.
right,
We're
right,
talking about
right,
the average.
right, right. You're talking
So
about
we're
people
talking
who
about the,
watch the game
on
more or less.
average is
Right,
the
right,
number that he's referring to toward. He's
right.
that 123 million number.
Hmm.
So what this drives me to is that even in the one thing that brings us together, we're not even talking about 40% of the population.
Mm.
Watch it on average.
And how many percentage of NPR slash PBS slash WHYY um, audience were watching the game? Probably more like 10% or something lower, maybe lower.
More than average, but yeah. Yeah, it is, it speaks to, and I think we're going to get to it as we get into the next couple pieces that we're going to tackle. We're in such this like hyper divide, and the gulf just seems to be widening and widening and widening, even in the
Well,
moment that we come together.
yes, and if I may, so I went to a Super Bowl party at a good friend of mine's who you also know, and I had a lovely time. I was so thrilled to be invited. I was invited at my next door neighbors too, and that would have been awesome. But I got a text. So there was some of this there. Got a text beforehand that somebody there uses they them pronouns from the hostess. Um, but the hostess was like, but this person's cool about it, like not super uptight and wanting people to. And actually, um, I was sent home with this person's amazing stuffed jalapeno peppers were like the hit of the party, and I was just like gobbling them up. So our friend gave them all to me to take home. But so I thought, okay, and then the hostess, dear friend of mine, really like a sister, truly like a sister to me, and she brought up Naomi Wolf's book Doppelganger, criticizing Naomi Klein, and I'm a big fan of Naomi Klein and all the work she's done to explore the science around the safety concerns with the COVID shots. And the sort of tone in the room just automatically, I wasn't about to like litigate COVID jabs at a fucking Super Bowl party, but I did say, I was like, okay, just so you know, there's a counter argument there in that book. There's issues with that book, blah, blah, blah. And it just kind of like people just kind of glazed over. And I could see there's just a culture of interpreting certain things. You bring up COVID jabs, conspiracy theories, automatically you're consigned to like the right wing loony, what they see as right wing extremist column, and there's a bunch of things like that. And I had an awesome time. These are friends of mine, but there is this divide. There's this like ambient language barrier, right? That even trying to explain something from a different you have to hack through this like thick rock wall of bias. And it's like, well, I can tell what media sources you've been into. I can tell what feeding tube is coming into your head. And again, I didn't argue it, not the time or place, but you encounter these things even in these situations, and all sorts of little biases like that. You can sort of tell people are coming from that WHYY curated. They're wearing those VR glasses on as they look out onto the world.
2 points. One, on the VR glasses, that one nearly made the cut for me, and it's something that I want to go back to on another occasion. I have lots to say about this, holding that off. Number one, I took from your anecdote something different.
Mm.
That glazed over look that you saw,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Super Bowl and Super Bowl parties have become an escape from the rest of all that stuff. And it's not that fights can't happen, but I've noticed from my experience that they've happened less for me.
Yeah, there was no fight here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I walked away.
You don't even go to that place where all that stuff that would have been a thing if it were a Tuesday at
a bar.
At a bar or
I
something.
think it would have been a fight. I think it would have been, yeah.
You don't want to do it now because this is one of those rare moments where we are together sharing a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that don't exist as much anymore.
No. I mean, where else? Unless you're parenting like your kid in a sports league or something, even then, I mean, I have these moments at the playground when my daughter gets out of school. There's a couple of afternoons where I hang out with the other parents. I do it with the moms on one day and with the dads on the other, and it's an awesome contrast. And a lot of this stuff comes up, but I know sort of where to drop in with something, like not to push somebody beyond what they can sort of tolerate in any given moment, right? I'm pretty like I read the room. Um, it's you what you're saying is totally true because I walked away from the party thinking, "Oh wow, we can be together again with people we like." I didn't like the idea of being having to be told ahead of time, notified that somebody uses they them. I don't use they them pronouns. It's too awkward grammatically. I just I'll just call the person by their name. Even in my writing, I always get around it by just using the person's name. Um, but at the same time, I'm eating this person's jalapeno peppers, getting to know them, hugging this person when they left, and like I was like, man, this can work. But you're right. When else is it going to work other than the Super Bowl?